right, good evening. We will go ahead and call the Planning Commission meeting of July 11th at 6:03 p.m. And Commissioner Garcia, will you lead us in the pledge, please? Please stand.
Absolutely. Wait 1 second for our commissioner. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and have roll call, please.
Chair Guerrero,
Yes.
Vice Chair Armstead, Commissioner Lopez, Commissioner Garcia,
Here.
Commissioner Quill, Commissioner Flores, Commissioner Lewis, Commissioner Sherrick,
Present.
and our other Commissioner Garcia.
Present.
All right, we have a full house.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and have the administration of oath, please.
If there's anybody who'd like to speak, please stand and raise your right hand. Desiree? You just need to stand right there. Just raise your hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do. Okay, you may be seated.
Okay, thank you. Any public comments on items not on the agenda? Okay. Okay. Is there anyone wishing? Okay, so then we'll go along with consent items are considered routine in nature and may be enacted in one motion. All public and non-public hearings will be opened at one time. Any item may be discussed separately upon request of a member of the Planning Commission or member of the public. Does staff have any updates to the consent calendar? Any updates? No? Okay. We'll go ahead and go with the, is there anyone wishing to speak on the consent calendar items? Okay. If not, I may entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second the motion. Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the consent calendar.
All right, Chair Guerrero,
Yes.
Vice Chair Armstead, Commissioner Lopez, Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Quill, Commissioner Flores,
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis,
Yes.
Commissioner Sherrick,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia.
Yes.
Okay, so the minutes are approved.
Okay, thank you. Public hearing items. The Planning Commission will first hear a report from staff, and then the public hearing will be open. The applicant will have an opportunity to speak. Next, members of the public will be allowed to speak. Anyone in the audience wishing to speak must be sworn in and also fill out a request to speak form. The forms are located on the table near the door. When your name is called, come forward and speak into the microphone, say and spell your name, and give your address for the taped record. After all have spoken, the applicant will be allowed to respond. The public hearing will then be closed, and the Planning Commission will begin deliberations and make a decision. All actions except general plan amendments and amendments to the Municipal Development Code are final unless an appeal is filed and fee paid within 15 days to the Community Development Department. If you challenge the resultant action of the Planning Commission in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described in this agenda, or in written correspondence delivered to the Community Development Department at or prior to the public hearing.
Okay, good evening, Honorable Chair and distinguished members of the Planning Commission. My name is Mary Lanier. I'm the Interim Community Housing and Economic Development Director for the city. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. It's my first Planning Commission meeting with you all. It's about my 6th week here. I just wanted to say I am excited to be back in San Bernardino. I started out here at the city a number of years ago. It was my first job as a planning intern, and I worked in the planning department. So it's exciting to be back here during this interim period. And during this time, I'd say in the city's history, a lot of exciting things moving forward. For your consideration this evening is going to be the draft housing element. And it's a pretty big document. It's a component of our general plan. It's something we do every 8 years, so I'm sure many of you are new to the commission and perhaps haven't reviewed a document like this. But it's a comprehensive document that really, it's our housing plan for the future. It includes our population, where we started, where we are expecting to go, kind of our overall housing, what's our housing conditions, what are our housing needs. It goes over, affordable housing, market rate housing, all of our properties, what we have available. There'll be some different programs that have been identified. So it's a pretty comprehensive document. Every city in the state of California is required to do one. And just to talk about, this is a draft document, and I'm going to have Travis do a presentation, kind of walk you through the different components. But this is our first stage of where we're going. We did put it out to public notice for public comment, so we did receive quite a few comments. We're still going through all of those. You've received some. We've received some tonight for the commission as well. We're documenting those. Some of them we've received, but they're reiterating their comments. We're kind of working through those. What's going to happen, and Travis will go through the schedule, but our next step after tonight will be the council meeting, and even during the time in between, we'll be taking public comments. Even while the draft is being reviewed, we'll transmit it to HCD, that's the Department of Housing and Community Development at the state. They're going to review and comment and make sure that we've included all the components that they're looking for and that they want to see in the document as well. So there'll be more going back and forth before you see the document in final form. So we'll make sure you get copies of that document when we bring it back to you as well. So all of the comments received, and I'll make sure we have those for the public record after Travis does his presentation. We also have our housing consultant, Mark Hoffman, that's here. He'll be available to answer questions. I would say this document's one of our first steps to kind of reinvent housing in San Bernardino. We've gone through a period of loss of a lot of funding for housing with the loss of redevelopment a number of years ago. So we're revamping up like a number of cities now. So we'll be moving forward. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Travis to kind of walk you through the draft element. Travis?
All right. Thank you, Mary. I'll go through a little bit of this information. Will sound familiar. It's just stated, but I'll just kind of run through very briefly at the beginning here. So the housing element, it's a required element of our general plan, one of 7 that's required. And as Mary had noted, it is something per state law that we have to update every 8 years. The current cycle that we're in is the 2029 period. That's what we're adopting the housing element, or preparing the housing element for. The prior period that we've concluded was the 2013 to 2021. That is what we are still working off of. The purpose of the housing element is to address housing needs, policies, programs, unmet needs, what we're currently doing within the city, just to look at how we're meeting certain goals from our previous cycle, how we can improve, in the coming cycle, things of that sort. And this is something, as mentioned, that does lean heavily on certain state requirements and does have to be reviewed by HCD before we can ultimately have a certified housing element. So a little bit of background. As mentioned, this is the single item that we're looking at this evening, but this is part of a much larger project. As we all know, we are working on an overall general plan update, development code update, downtown plan. This is one small component of that as a portion of the general plan. Originally, back in September 2020, that was when we started our contract with PlaceWorks to update all of these documents. And this has been worked on since then. Now it has been pulled out kind of as a separate item, so we can adopt this first because of certain, timing requirements, and then ultimately will be incorporated when the overall general plan is updated. For the housing element specifically, back in 2022, we did do a number of public workshops, some of these and committee meetings, both with primarily with our GPAC, the General Plan Advisory Committee. These were some related specifically to housing. I know Mark graced us with his presence at several of the GPAC meetings to talk housing. We also had a lot of workshops where we talked general plan at large, some focus on housing, other things, because it really is something that gets touched by everything in what we're doing. You know, land use dictates housing, the housing policy does. It's all tied together. With the current draft that has been provided, that was completed earlier this spring, kind of in the March, April area. We did go through some final review through the city, and then ultimately between May and June of this year, we did submit it for 30 days of public review, which is where we received the bulk of our comments, similar to what you have in front of you and we'll speak to in just a moment. Through this whole process, there was a lot of outreach, as I mentioned, a lot of workshop meetings, things of that sort. Just kind of a brief overview without going through every meeting. The types of things that were done were those visioning workshops, that we held ward by ward. A lot of that, as I noted, was tied to the overall general plan, but did heavily, discuss housing and housing policy. We also had our committee meetings, both the downtown and general plan. We have our city's website and the overall project website where we've been posting regular updates about this document, previous drafts of the document, some of our technical reports, and then information about all the meetings. That's where we've also been soliciting comments from the public. And then there's been direct consultation with a lot of our stakeholder groups, certain advocacy groups within the city, and other housing developers, things of that sort, just to get their direct comment. In addition to what's been done so far, this month, before we wrap things up and hopefully submit to the state, we will be holding 3 additional workshops. Those are all going to be sometime in the coming week. We're still working on finalizing dates and times for that. Once that's happened, we will be distributing, as we have before, I believe with the public review, information to a number of interested parties we worked with, stakeholder groups, and then yourself and our other commissions and committees. Oops, sorry, wrong slide. So just a little bit of overview with the document that's been presented. It's broken up into 7 different chapters, as you can see above. Through that, there's a number of things that are done, just kind of broadly speaking. Starts with, an assessment of what the need is of housing within the city. We go through and look at constraints, whether there's limitations on zoning or, environmental issues or social issues that may, make housing development difficult. We look at housing opportunities that we have in the city, what the needs are for fair housing. And then the last 2 chapters are looking at programs that we've had before in our previous housing elements, because ultimately this is not a new document. It is really, an update to what we have done in the past. And then the final section being new programs and policies that we've developed to implement all these housing plans in this 8-year cycle that we're in now. And then the other big portion, through all of that is kind of the site inventory, because the key thing within the housing element is something called our RHNA. That's the Regional Housing Needs Assessment or Allotment. I don't know. It gets used interchangeably. What that is through the state for every planning cycle that we're in, there's a certain number of housing units that are designated kind of through regional authorities that would need to be not necessarily developed, but need to have the ability to develop. As we all know, California has a lot of housing issues. There's a lot of unmet need. So that's a very important thing that's assigned. For our region, we're in the SoCal Association of Governments, that's SCAG. There's a number that was allotted to them prior to the beginning of this planning cycle in 21. And then from that, they then take that overall number and all of the jurisdictions within their authority, they allocate a specific number to, as far as what type of housing units we have to allow for. For our city specifically, sorry, that number is on the next slide here. That number would be a total of 8,123 units. Again, that's not something we necessarily have to develop within that period, because as the city, we are not a developer, but we do need to be able to allow for that. So through certain density allowances, certain zoning, programs, other incentives, things of that sort, we need to be able to say if somebody wanted to come in and throughout the entire city build 8,123 units, they would be able to do so. Taking that number, it's then broken up into 5 different sections, or 5 different kind of groupings. You have extremely and very low income, moderate, and above moderate, because we do need to make sure as part of this that we are providing for all different types of housing, not just your low income, not your market rate, and above, single family, multifamily. It needs to be kind of broad across the board. So what we have done in the document here, and a lot of the legwork that Mark has assisted with greatly is, or Mark and his team, excuse me, is looking at what our current zoning, current densities, and all of our current policies allow for between the lower, moderate, and above moderate categories. We look at, the allocation. You can see on the very top of that 8,100 units, approximately 2,500 needs to be in the lower category, about 1,500 in the moderate, and almost 4,200 in the above moderate. Then we look at the number of projects that we already have in the pipeline, as we describe it. Those are things that are either already approved, under construction, maybe in the entitlement process. Projects that you've seen over the last few months here, some of our housing developments, those are included in things like that. We look at that and say, okay, that is the number that we are already doing, so we can take that right off the top of those categories, and then what is remaining? And that's what those first three lines are. Below that, then we look at, okay, how can we accommodate that additional development through this period? And that's done looking at a number of things, surplus property that the city owns that is then trying to sell off, former redevelopment property, because first and foremost, that property is intended to go to affordable housing developers, should they be interested. We have vacant land within the downtown area. We have vacant land elsewhere in the city that is zoned for residential and has that carrying capacity. And then we do look, now that they've become more prevalent here in the city, our accessory dwelling units. That's kind of looking, what we've done statistically over the last certain years or several years, and then extrapolating that out through the planning period, looking at kind of typically what could we build if the current trends continue. And then that gives us, our total numbers that we can meet in all of those categories, and whether or not we're over. With the document that's been prepared for you this evening, we have been able to come up with capacity that exceeds the RHNA in all three categories. You can see at the bottom there, in the lower income, we're approximately 500 units over the requirement. The moderate is about 300, and then 100 over the above moderate. And then with the other thing, the final section in the housing plan, or in the housing element, as I mentioned, is that goals and policies section. So there's a number of policies in there. I forget the number. We're in the 20s, I think. Yeah, somewhere between 20 and 30. Forgive me, I forget the number at the moment. But primarily, they're broken up into 5 kind of key categories that then encompass multiple goals specifically. Those categories that we're looking at, the goals, broadly speaking, are number 1, to facilitate and improve the development of safe and high-quality housing that is diverse, providing for all different types of housing, tenure, whether it be permitted, transitory housing, multifamily, things of that sort, and at different levels and in different locations throughout the city. The second grouping of goals is about reducing government and non-governmental constraints. A lot of the things that speaks specifically to are code updates that we're also in the process of doing with the general plan and the development code, incorporating new housing legislation, creating, possibly changing densities, where it may limit things, or looking at, like entitlement requirements, for the development of new housing. The third goal, or the third grouping, is about providing neighborhoods of well-maintained homes with ample public services, meeting open space needs, recreational needs, and the infrastructure to provide, safe and quality places to live. That looks a lot at the existing housing stock, and rehabbing that, and making sure that, it's maintenance of housing, whether it's existing or not, is an ongoing thing. It's not just about building new stock. The fourth is assisting in the development of affordable housing through provisions for homeowners and rental assistance. That's a lot of what we're doing with our housing division. Specifically, they have a number of programs that they're implementing for that. And then the fifth one is furthering fair housing opportunities, looking at outreach, things we can do, and trying to be more proactive in providing housing availability and affordability to everyone. And then a little bit, as Mary touched on in the introduction here, bringing this forward this evening for your review. Ultimately, Pending moving forward from this meeting, we would be looking to go to council. This would be on August 2nd. This would be for the same purpose, for their review and consideration of this. Again, this is not for adoption of the document. This is simply to move the item forward to our submittal to HCD. Once that is complete, and we do have the council's blessing, then we would submit almost immediately to HCD for review. That's a period that we have ideas of what that may take, but it's a little bit of a fluid process. They review, they comment, we revise, so there's a little bit of a back and forth there. And as noted, during that period, we will still be open to public comments. You know, it is not a finished document by any means at that point, so we're going to constantly be incorporating things kind of on a rolling basis. During that period, we're also going to be preparing the environmental review for the document. As it is right now, because everything that's being done in here ties to our existing general plan, primarily to our existing zoning, it's not yet incorporating the changes that we're doing with the general plan and the development code update. Because of that, we are not looking to do the environmental review concurrent with the general plan. What we would be doing would be an addendum to the environmental that was done on our current general plan. Because everything is still tearing off of that, and it's substantially the same as what was looked at before, or substantially similar. When all that's done, and once we receive HCD's kind of contingent approval, then ultimately it would come back through both yourselves and through the Planning Commission for the recommendation of adoption, and I'm sorry, I said Planning Commission, through the council for the ultimate adoption, and then once the city has adopted it, we do have to submit it one final time to HCD with record of that adoption by the city for their certification. At that point, we have a finished housing element. And that's something that we're looking at having kind of in the early part of next year, probably first quarter approximately, just given certain procedural requirements and those additional reviews. With that, we do just have a number of actions that we're looking for this evening. Again, none of this is for adoption or approval of the document. What we're looking for from yourselves and from the public, items 1 and 2, are just to receive any comments, questions, things that we may clarify, just for the benefit of the document as we prepare it for submission. And then based off those comments, receiving your authorization to amend the document as necessary to incorporate any of those. And then by motion only, there is no resolution on this item this evening. It would just be a motion to recommend that the council ultimately authorize the submittal of the document to HCD. So similar to what we would do on any other council recommendation, but without a resolution. And with that, brings it to the end of my presentation. As mentioned, we do have our consultant, our lead on the housing element here, as well as our staff for any questions.
Thank you, Travis. And I think the next step is to open public comments. I did want to note for the record the actual comments we received so we can actually log them in. Chair. And one was received by the Inland Region Housing Justice Coalition regarding the housing element, specifically to remove the crime-free multi-housing program, something we are looking at different components of. The other one is by the American Civil Liberties Union Foundation, also known as the ACLU. And the third comment letter is from the Inland County Legal Services. And all have expressed concerns on the housing element. We are going through to address the comments as we're able to in the final document.
Okay,
So I just
thank
wanted to
you.
make sure I had those agencies actually on the record as providing comments to you this evening.
So we'll
Can you
go
have
ahead
some
and
of those
open up the
comments?
public hearing for this item.
Yes.
And do we have speakers? Thank you.
Commissioners, my name is Desiree Sanchez. I'm with the American Civil Liberties Union of Southern California. I've been a San Bernardino County resident for more than a decade now, so thank you for letting me come to present to you. As you've heard, there was 3 letters requesting your recommendation to, as item number 3 allows you today to make a motion to remove or recommend anything in the housing element. What we're asking you is that the commission direct and authorize staff to revise the draft housing element program 3.2, the crime-free multi-housing program, for all the reasons that we stated in the written public comment, and that we previously submitted this letter of recommendation several weeks ago and then also sent it to you today. To summarize, what we discuss in detail in the letter is the crime-free program conflicts with state and federal housing laws, so it opens up the city to liability. We are being sued at this time right now because of our crime-free housing program. It is discriminatory, and the sections of the draft housing element that discuss the program are full of factual and legal inaccuracies and claims about the program impact on crime that are totally unsupported by any evidence. The draft housing element suggests that the city might extend the crime-free housing multi-program to mobile homes. Instead of eliminating it, they want to make it even more discriminatory. So you should direct staff to remove the suggestion because the program should be ended, not expanded. And then finally, just want to recommend that the draft housing element should be revised to remove the inaccurate suggestion that the city's development of additional shelter beds to address 60% of housing needs enables it criminally enforce anti-camping laws. Thank you so much, and we look forward to your yes vote and a recommendation motion to eliminate 3.2 of the housing element. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Can you please, yes? Oh, okay.
On the housing element?
Okay.
You weren't here when I administered the oath, can you please no worries, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is David Friedman. I'm a developer in San Bernardino. Specifically, my father and I, we focus on downtown San Bernardino. I'm assuming everyone here has been to Redlands or Riverside, and I know San Bernardino is different, but I think it's important to look to them for examples of good housing element. You know, the entire city and county basically run on Esri maps. And they have more data than we could possibly even imagine as far as housing and all this stuff. And I know a lot of people complain about the Arrow, a lot of people complain about SBX, but it's important that we develop with those considerations in mind. We need walkable housing. We need housing that is accessible to public transportation. We need people to have the option to live in housing that doesn't require a car to get around. They can use the Arrow, they can use SBX. And so I want to ask you guys, just like the specific plan, to consider another study on E and D Street up and down SBX, where SBX travels, as an expansion of higher density housing. Right now, the specific plan is looking, is discussing higher density housing. But I think either that needs to be expanded up E and D all the way to baseline, or its own specific study needs to be done. I own about 5 acres on 8th Street between E and D. I just signed an ENA with Chalk Housing. They're an affordable housing developer in Palm Springs and up in the Bay Area. And we want to bring 300 units to that area. AB 2097 allows us to build all 300 units without parking if we want. I don't think it's reasonable at this time to do so. I think but that being said, the higher density that we bring to downtown San Bernardino and other areas, the more likely that we'll be able to bring that walkable kind of community that we're hoping to bring here. It's not just a matter of like affordability for housing, it's also a matter of, helping and saving the climate. And so I think I'd like to really see you guys look into E and D Street all the way up to baseline further for higher density housing. Because as of right now, it's just basically like single family plus an ADU, according to this housing element. So thank you, that's all.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You just need to be. Jessica will administer your oath.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do.
I do.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Sonia Gray Hun, and everything that the young man just spoke upon, I agree upon. But one thing that I noticed that when I looked at went on the city website, and I'm looking at the projects, I don't really see a clear definition on the up-and-coming project or what that look like for affordable housing. So if we can actually be intentional about putting that on there, for the public can be well informed of what that look like and what your attention are in regards to getting in compliance with the housing element. It'd be much appreciated. And also, I just want to piggyback on Ms. Desiree Sanchez, asking that we be intentional about submitting, I want to make sure I say right, that in regards to the draft housing element, that it should be revised to eliminate program 3.2 crime-free housing, multi-housing program. We know that whatever's going to be built in our city needs to be intentional, that we're not creating barriers for the residents that's already here. We know that we work with a certain demographic that might have some challenges and some barriers, and we don't want to make a bad situation worse. As we're saying that we're advocating for our city and our community, we know that there's multiple things that needed for our community. We know we need businesses. We know we want to clean up our area to attract more businesses. But what I'm really advocating for is the long-term residents that have been a part of San Bernardino, that they don't be displaced, that they be a part of the process. We know that many meetings you get invited to, but also you also know that there's barriers of how people can show up at these meetings, and really the distrust of the city overall, that people feel like what's the use. So even though they're not here, I speak and advocate for those who's not here, that we be intentional in including them and in, updating the website. And I have no problem once we see that that is being implemented, then most definitely we can have those conversations as organizers and residents of the community to make sure that we advocate and say, hey, the city done this, take a look at it. We're partners in this. Let's be intentional how we move forward, and let's be transparent, and let's make sure that we see what we're talking about reflected on our city website. I thank you for your time.
Okay, anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Commissioners?
I have a question to staff. So it was 8 years ago that we put this housing element together?
So the housing element for the prior period. Just ended. That period, we adopted that, I believe it was February or March of 2014, I believe February. That was for the period commencing at the end of 2013 and running until late 2021.
Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm going to close the public hearing. Thank you.
Okay, my question is, with this new proposed housing program, is there any way that you can show us a side-by-side document of some sort of what changes have been applied to this new one over and above the previous one?
I would say generally speaking, and this would be kind of similar to the rest of the general plan update, the upcoming development code update, all of those, the changes we're doing are almost so substantial that we really couldn't do, just a one-for-one or kind of a strike-through version.
Okay.
I think it would just almost be a little bit prohibitive.
Okay, the other question I have is, we have a large rental element in San Bernardino, and we have been discussing the short-term rental program. Do any of those things fit into this element, to this program?
It's not my understanding that they would, because that's not in the same way that the housing element wouldn't discuss, hotels, motels, any other type of, transitory housing.
Okay.
Short-term rentals are not someone's, permanent
that's
or
completely-
semi-permanent housing unit. That would be really a separate thing.
Okay.
Is that?
And also the rental house inspection programs or anything like that, that would all be code enforcement, that wouldn't necessarily be this plan?
Yeah. You want to? I'll bring up Mark as well. That's something that's addressed in the housing element, but those types of programs are ultimately implemented by the Code Enforcement Division. But
I see.
So in the housing plan, there's approximately 35 or 40 programs, and those programs will be implemented to carry out the goals and policies that are in the housing element. So for example, one of the goals talked about neighborhood quality and housing quality. There are a set of policies, 4 or 5, and then that's implemented by probably about 4 or 5 housing programs. One, of course, is code enforcement. The other one is inspections of properties. The other one could be rehabilitation of homes, things like that.
Okay, but those are provided into the housing program?
Yes, they are. They're in the housing element.
Okay. Is there, in this housing element, is there an increased amount of concern or direction towards the rental program or code enforcement? It seems like we never have enough code enforcement officers for the safety of the housing element in general and the neighborhoods. So I'd like to see a lot of that in there.
Sure. And so when we started the initial housing element, you were still coming out of the bankruptcy and hadn't completely exited bankruptcy. And at that time, there was 5 code enforcement officers for a city of 60 square miles, which it's insufficient. Since then, there have been an additional hire for about 20 code enforcement officers, as well as other code enforcement that deal with more public works cleanup types of issues. And so we do indicate in the housing element that the housing stock conditions are serious in the city. They need to be cleaned up, and we know that. And we do have a program that tries to get funding to rehabilitate those properties, looks at ways that the city can hire additional staff for code enforcement efforts, because you need that as well. And so part of it, it's a housing issue, but it's also a larger city issue as well, tied in with the annual budget, making sure that the funding streams, that you're generating the funds that you need so you actually can hire the staff that you need. And I think that's been a long-term issue here in the city that goes back probably a decade.
You are correct, and thank you. Thanks for addressing that, because that is one of the biggest needs we have in our overall city, of the whole community. Thank you.
One thing I do just want to clarify with that, though, just to make sure we all have the same expectations on things. The housing element, as part of the general plan and in the same way that the other elements do, it's more about describing the policy, goals, things that we want to achieve, both with the development of housing, the enforcement of things, the rehabilitation, things like that. It doesn't in itself specifically define how those programs would work. It does lead to who would be responsible for implementing them. Like sections, as an example, for amending the general plan and the code are deferred more to the planning division. The rental programs, things like that, deferred to code enforcement. But exactly, who would be doing it, or exactly how, or how that would operate, those are then specific implementation issues that get addressed separately. So it's not. This does not cover. This covers the broad intent, but not the exact point by point of how all of that will happen.
Okay, well, thank you. But like I said, that to me is one of the biggest elements we have to deal with in our community.
Yeah.
Those of us that have been around here for a long time see that is our shortfall.
I understand. I just
Thank
wanted
you.
to make that
Thank you.
that clarity.
Good evening. I noticed in the report it said they were hiring 20 inspectors. Are those code officers or building inspectors?
So with that, I'll answer that. We currently are staffing up for 20 code enforcement officers as part of a broader code enforcement program and neighborhood enhancement.
I also noticed that we mentioned that there were 36 apartment complexes that were surveyed. Was there just one area in the city where they were surveyed, or were they spread out? And do we know how many was it defined by like wards? Was it defined by north of the freeway, or how was that?
I would say they are citywide, but I think our housing consultant can give you a little more detail.
Thank you.
I'll allow Mark to speak to that.
Sure. And so what we did is we actually used there's online inventories of apartment projects. And some, of course, it's very difficult to get rental information, but the apartments are located throughout the city. And so we're able to, if what happens is a service will go out there, they will ask them about their rents, and then they'll log them in on the site. And so we have them in all different areas, up from Vermont to the south, to the east, to the west, both affordable projects as well as just market rate. So we've got.
So in those apartment complexes, were senior-only apartment complexes surveyed?
We
or was
also have
it-
senior only, yes, we do.
But was that included in the 36 apartment complexes?
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I did read through it. On page 328, which is the program 3.2 crime-free multi-housing, I am asking that we repeal or eliminate this section because it is very biased, especially in our city with our various demographics. I can see it being misused and abused. Also, I believe on April 5th, the council voted to repeal it. So why is it back here? That's a question. If the council voted to repeal it, why is it back in here? But mainly I see it as very biased. You have the background checks, criminal background checks. I can see that being blatantly abused. It allows the PD to bust in without a warrant. We've already seen on the news what can happen when you do that. So there's no, it's wide open for abuse. I don't see any policy or anything to protect the citizens. This is wide open for abuse. And if it's been repealed, why is it back here? You have other cities being sued for this element. I think we should repeal, take this element out. It is not ready to be approved, even in draft form. Because I can see how it's going to be greatly abused. It's been abused. It'll be abused more. So why are we having it here? We need to take it out completely. This is, and instead of taking it out, you want to expand it to mobile home projects. So you're expanding the ability to abuse our residents. And remember, San Bernardino has a very, very demographic. And a large portion of them have been abused. And this just opens it up for more abuse. Quite a few of our population, they may have an old criminal a criminal background check might find something that's old. That gives the landlord permission to evict somebody else. Plus, my understanding is if a citizen, if a resident has 2 911 calls, one could be a child choking, the second one could be grandma passed out on the floor, that's cause for eviction because they had 2 911 calls. This is not ready to be approved the way it's written. It's not ready to be approved. I think it should be repealed. A lot of abuse in here, a lot of abuse. It's been abused and will be abused more, and you're just expanding the abuse to mobile home projects. You're expanding.
So thank you, Vice Chair, for your comments. I'll go ahead and address this. We are looking at the crime-free multi-housing program. It's in the document. I know you mentioned in April, perhaps, I know there's a council action, so I can't speak to that. But the draft has been in the works for a while. So this is the exact draft that went out for public review. So we are stepping back and taking a look at some of these programs and taking a look at the comments we received from the public very seriously. So I know specifically this program is being looked at.
So my question, if this is a draft, can we eliminate it at this point since it's a draft and you're still reviewing comments and then bring it back? I'm not comfortable with approving a draft with something this blatantly abusive to our people. I don't see that. I'd rather it be repealed, and since this is a draft, then clean it up and then bring it back.
Yeah.
But right now, it's blatant.
So what we can do is the commission could recommend that that component be removed, and your recommendation to council.
Okay.
So you could make that
Can I
recommendation.
make a motion right now?
Well, I think we want to hear from the other commissioners to see if
Okay.
there's any other comments
right.
on it.
Thank you. Sure. And thank you, Commissioner Dolores. I agree with you 100%. Having a program targeting apartments and potentially mobile homes is discrimination, given the demographics that tend to live in those apartments and mobile homes. And begs the question, why wouldn't any other type of housing go through a program like that? On the topic of the Airbnb short-term rentals, I would argue that it should be included in the housing element, given that it has the potential to take away permanent housing units in the city, which is different from how hotels function. Another comment I would like to see addressed in an additional draft of the housing element is the acknowledgement and mention of LGBTQ individuals who we know are disproportionately of homeless youth are LGBTQ and should be a concerted effort in the city in terms of addressing fair housing and homelessness. Additionally, there is little to no discussion on how industrial and warehouse developments are affecting the ability to meet our housing needs in the city. It's my understanding that the city received a pretty clear letter from the Attorney General on the airport's gateway specific plan, which is already causing displacement, and the plan hasn't even been approved yet. So it'd be a missed opportunity to not discuss what the city plans to proactively do to address issues when people are being displaced from proposed plans that haven't even been approved yet related to industrial. And then lastly, my question on process on element updates, the general plan element updates. Travis, you had mentioned that since housing element is obviously taking priority right now, the environmental SECRA process will take place as an addendum to our existing general plan. My question is, my understanding is that state law requires you to also update the safety element and consequently the environmental justice element. So what's the status on trying to meet those requirements concurrently, or what's the plan there?
I can answer that. So as part of the general plan update, the comprehensive general plan update, we will be addressing the safety element component with that. Because we are behind on the housing element, we needed to pull that out and get this particular document in, but we are addressing the other elements with the overall comprehensive general plan. So it will include the safety element and the environmental justice component.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have another question. I'm not sure how it relates. We have a high level of absentee landlords. Is that part of this at all? I'm just questioning. How does that fit in?
That's a tough one, reaching out to the absentee landlords. With the housing element, we do try to do, I think, some overall outreach. I think with the programs and a lot of the, I would say the quality of life efforts in the city that are kind of moving forward right now with code enforcement and our quality of life team. We're looking at kind of that holistic approach and trying to reach out to some property owners. So perhaps with that venue, as they're starting to see some of the other improvements, we can actually connect with some of those. But it is difficult when we have the absentee landlords, but we certainly can, through our code enforcement efforts, really reach out to them as far as property maintenance. I think that's a big thing that we'll be looking at moving forward. But we do have quite a few in the city, unfortunately.
Good afternoon. In regards to Section 3.2, I know that this program has been around that I know of in the city of San Bernardino since at least as far as back that I know of is like 92, 93. And I would like some information on how, I mean, I'm certain that there's been revisions to it since then. And if there have been revisions to it, which I'm sure there is, what can we get information on what those revisions were? And in general, how has this program worked? Have we served our community well by implementing this? Because it's been around for a long time. This is not something new. And there are subsequent laws that would automatically prevent certain criminal elements from moving in, say, to within 1,000 feet of schools, with playgrounds and things like that. There's certain, I mean, what is the need to continue I mean, has it served us well? That's my question. Is there some data that says, hey, this has been a good thing for the community?
So I don't have, a full overview of the program for you this evening, but certainly some very good questions. I know our code enforcement team has been looking at the program. What is the progress? And you are correct. I remember this program when it first started, years ago in the 90s. I think it certainly has evolved since then, and perhaps it is time to take a look at some of the components, which I know our staff is looking at. Perhaps some revamping. I'm not sure where we're going to go with that. Since it is related to housing, once we get that kind of finalized, we certainly could provide an overview to the commission so that you have a good, understanding of what the program is and where the city's going with it.
Yeah, thank you. I can give you a little bit the explosion of the criminal drug activity on both sides, whether it was sellers, users, whatever. But that exploded in the 80s. And I'm certain that this program was derived out of a need to, and needless to say, it was predominantly our lower income areas that were a victim of the drug explosion back in the 80s. I understand that the city had to do something. They had to come out and do something. So maybe this was something that was put in place to combat that and get that under control. But just like taxes, it's a runaway. It looks like it's a runaway train, and some of the revisions, amendments that's been made to 3.2 over the years. I'm just curious as to how have they worked. I go back to my previous question, and I know you don't have an exact answer to that, but that's what's in my mind. I mean, we just got it on the books for show, or what's going on? Is this a viable program, or is it necessary still?
Good questions, and we will look into that and get some information back to the commission.
Since we don't have answers on this, and we know this has been abused in this city and other cities, I again say we should repeal it. It's not ready to be approved as written. It's not. It's been abused.
Okay, thank you. Just to piggyback on Mr. Lewis's comments. My understanding was that the multi-crime housing element unit was twofold: to give the landowner an incentive to clean up his property, because it also had to do with the landscaping and so forth, the lighting and so forth, to clean up his property. Also, it gave protection and safety to renters, because not all renters are criminal elements. You don't have to be poor, and you don't necessarily are a criminal element. But it had to give the renters some safety in when you have one neighborhood that moves in, one neighborhood that's selling drugs and brings all kinds of people to the unit and so forth. And so it was also for their protection. And gave the renter, the landlord, a little bit more leverage to control the situation. Now, maybe with the time, because it did meet and the city had to do something, we were being infiltrated by gangs moving out this way and so forth, and they were sending their girlfriends who usually had the money and the welfare and so forth, and then they would move in. And we saw whole units of apartments just damaged by it. But I guess maybe now with the application being broad, some people fall to the cracks, how many times they called to emergency, how many, what the felony was or how long ago it was and so forth. Some people did fall to the cracks. And I would like to see that we amend that, but that we can keep as much as possible where the landlord's still maintaining the property and so forth, intact.
One of the things that I've found, and I've been doing housing elements, throughout San Bernardino County and the Inland Empire. I work with cities that have crime-free multi-housing programs currently, also ones that have them extended to mobile homes, and other ones that don't have them at all. But it is not common. I mean, it is common for programs to require retooling over time. It's just the way it is, because circumstances change, your needs change, and the programs have to be changed and tailored along the way. There's also, at the same time, there's quite a bit of fair housing law, and that changes all the time. So 10 years ago, we did not have letters from the Attorney General's office saying you can't do this or that. It just wasn't on the radar. 10 years ago, there wasn't lawsuits up in Hesperia or other kinds of places that highlighted some of the abuses that can occur with programs. And so I think regardless of the programs that you have in the housing element, you really shouldn't see them really as just fixed. They're not going to change. I mean, they're there for a reason. In some cases, the programs will have outlived their usefulness, and they need to be phased out. In other situations, you'll have programs which still have good pieces to it, but you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So, for example, you had mentioned a question about absentee landlords. One of the key issues, I work with cities where they've had inspection programs where every time they change over a rental for a single-family dwelling, it has to be inspected. That's part of the business licensing process, and they do that so they can pick up the code violations, the electrical violations, clean up the property and whatnot. Now, if that becomes a situation where the owners are being abusive to the tenants, that's where it becomes a problem, obviously. But you do need some kind of inspection program to keep the units in good shape. So just as you think about the programs, I guess I would challenge and encourage you to look at those, look at the programs which have clearly outlived their usefulness and need to be cast aside, and others which need to be retooled. Some may need to be retooled a little bit, some may need to be retooled substantially. And so there is the ability to have that in the housing element and have that constant retooling process. And so that's just something that I've come across with the 75 cities that I've worked with. And I know you mentioned one point that you like to have the program retooled. There's also evidence that the program has been abused. And so the question is, what do you do with a program that has both that going? So just these are just things that, and these are good questions to have for the housing element. And you're going to find this as well with other programs. You may find with code enforcement, well, this program's not working well. Well, no program works well when you have 5 code enforcement officers in a city that needs 40. But if you have too many of them, then we run a police state. So, so just think about these. You know, I want you to take a look at the programs, think about their usefulness, and then we can retool them as needed or discard them to make them work like they're intended. So just
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, again, I'm saying at this time, this section is not ready. It is open for abuse the way it is currently written. You want us to approve something right now that is written for great abuse. And I'm uncomfortable. It was already repealed. Why is it back? You haven't answered that. Why is it back if it was repealed on April 5th? You slipped it back in here. It is not, well, whoever. It was repealed, is back in here. That's basically, it was repealed, it's back in here. Why is it in here? It's not ready to be approved. You said it needs a lot of work. You got a lot of comments. That has not been incorporated in here. So the way this is written, it's not ready.
So with the housing element, it still is in a draft form, and we will be massaging it based on comments we received. I know this program is being looked at, so there is going to be some modifications there. It will come back to you in its final form for review. Right now, our goal is to work with our consultant to get this document in its current form. We'll be making some edits as we bring it forward to council. Have the council, you know, should the commission recommend moving it forward, which that is a staff recommendation. We do have some time constraints that we're working with, that we do need to get it up to HCD for their review. So we go to city council for their review, and then it would be transmitted to HCD. We'll continue to make changes. I'm sure HCD will be having some even more comments for us. We'll edit those comments. We'll work closely with HCD and bring the final documents back to the Planning Commission. You will see the final document before it goes back before council. And I think at that time, if the program hasn't been fine-tuned enough, or I don't know yet whether it will be eliminated or maybe it's fine-tuned to bring it up to what it might need to help the community. And I remember these programs. They were good at the beginning. I was working in the 80s. There was a lot of problems coming into communities, and it was a solution on how to deal with those at that time. It doesn't mean it doesn't need to be retooled. I can say based on my review, it does. So I know the staff is working through that. So we're not asking you to approve the program. You can recommend to the council to take it out, in your motion this evening, that you feel it should, that particular program, you're concerned about it, and make that recommendation. And then we will take your recommendation on that to the council for their consideration.
So being that this document is a work in progress, so all of the comments that were made by commissioners and the public, they'll be taken into consideration and reword, or maybe a word would be eliminated, or something that if there is a specific word that is being used would be more, sensitive, and being able to re-present this document. Is that?
So we will I've taken notes, and on your comments as well. We will take those into consideration. We will bring those forward to City Council as we're addressing all the comments. So I believe, and I'll defer to Mark, I believe all the comments we received, will you be doing those like a response to comments on each letter? I'm thinking like an EIR. Do you do that type of format, or do you respond to each one?
We respond to probably as many comments that we can address. There are some comments that are policy decisions that need to be made by, for example, the council. And so we may get a comment that says completely change or wipe out this permit process. Well, we can't really do that, But what we can do is bring that comment forward, but at the same time, we address what we can on this is a key policy issue, and we need folks from all levels to basically buy off and say, you know, the program's canceled, we want to add programs, we want to subtract programs. But I think what we can do here is bring up all concerns that have been raised and say, these are the legitimate issues that have, and they're all legitimate issues, these are the issues that have been brought up, and ask for direction on how they want those to be reflected in the programs. And so, does that make sense?
It does, because there will be more comments made at these workshops that are
Yes,
coming
there
up.
will be.
So not just from what we're doing tonight, there'll be additional comments
Yes,
too.
we'll be getting quite a few.
And I might add, so this is referenced in this document, okay, right now. This is not the program, this is not the implementation document for this particular program or any of the others. This is just, I think Mark kind of went into it, this is outlining everything we have available. And then as we're seeing, you know, modifications needed, we can direct those to the appropriate departments. In this case, code enforcement, this is their program. We'll be working with them. But this isn't the actual program itself in here, so recommending we not use the program, we'll take that to council for their consideration, but it doesn't, that in itself doesn't eliminate the program. That will require another step in elimination of the program or modification, as the case may be.
One thing I just may add, and thank you, that was similar to the response to Commissioner Quayle to your comment. This is really just, as with the general plan at large, it's a policy document. We don't dictate exactly, you know, what is done in here. If, as to Mark's comments, and I know Commissioner Lopez, you know, if there were changes made to that program or any other program the city has, they wouldn't be defined explicitly in this document. They would be in whatever other subsequent approval or implementation measure that actually established that. And one other thing that was just brought to my attention, I just do want to clarify for the benefit of all, at the April 5th meeting, and this is actually noted, it's helpful enough in the ACLU letter. At the April 5th meeting, there was the item that came forward regarding the crime-free program. That was something that was brought up not for discussion with a report or with an actual action taken. It was something noted to be brought back for a future meeting. That's actually noted in section B on page 3 of the ACLU letter. They did vote to agendize a motion to repeal the program based off of public comment. But since that meeting, there has been no item brought back to the council to formally repeal it. So it's something they brought up for discussion, for future, but it has not been acted on yet. So as of now, it appears that program is still in place.
Yes, but Travis, can we not include a rental program or lay out some sort of a rental licensing program to include inspections, such as what Mark related to, that he's seen in other cities? And can't that be included in this program?
No, certainly, and all I was saying is that type of thing, you know, broadly speaking, we want a program for this or to achieve this goal, that would be included within the element, you know, phrased in some way, you know, probably similar to that. Exactly what that entails, you know, how that specific goal is achieved through points, you know, A, B, C, D, et cetera, that is not defined in here, just as those are typically not defined in, you know, the goals and policies that we have throughout all of the elements of the general plan.
Okay. Well, as you may or may not know, the city had one at one time that was very effective, and it was in the mid-90s. And we saw a terrific impact, a good impact on the whole overall community within a year's time.
No, and
program.
that's, like I said, certainly that's something great and that type of thing to be included. I just want to make it clear, policy and implementation, this is the policy side, it's what we want to achieve and accomplish. The implementation is the follow-up that is separate from what's within this bound document.
Okay, thank you,
That's all
Travis.
I wanted to clarify.
I think overall, I think it's fair to say we want quality residents, whether they're homeowners, renters, you know, and I think ultimately, I think that's what our goal is and to work towards. So thank you so much for putting this forth. With that, does anyone else have a comment? If we'll go ahead, okay.
I have a few additional questions. Mary, I wanted to make sure I understood you correctly. The crime-free housing program, will that be looked at thoroughly by the time this is finally adopted?
I will say yes.
Okay. In the report, it noted that there was a lack of childcare, predominantly for ages 3 and under. And I was wondering, can conditions be placed when we have a large warehouse that comes in that promises like 1,500 jobs? Can there be conditions put on employers such as that they maybe provide a space in their warehouse that would be a daycare center, where a daycare center could go in there to provide that type of assistance for their employees? Or is there something we can do to, minimize that lack of childcare?
I think that would be something we'd have to look at individually. We have no mechanism to require them for childcare. I would even hesitate on an industrial development to consider mixing a daycare center in the type of operations I've seen. I'm not sure it's conducive to having children in that environment. You want the outdoor activities. You really want what we consider like a child care center that has outdoor activity, indoor, other facilities. So I can certainly check, but I'm not sure of any mechanism. And Mark, go ahead.
I'm not aware of specific mechanisms. I know that there are sometimes requirements. But what I have found is that I know in the city where you have multifamily apartment projects, many of those which are large enough, the owner will have a vendor actually come in and offer classes, childcare, educational classes, et cetera. So you could look at the new Arrowhead Grove project. They have those. Some of the new projects that apply for low-income housing tax credits, they get extra, they're more competitive when they offer childcare services. And I know, for example, there's another group, National Core. They have, I think, Hope for Housing. There's a group that will actually get in there and have after-school activities and things like that. So that's kind of another option that I'm seeing much more these days.
Thank you. I also have another question. One of the speakers commented on high-density housing on E&D up to baseline. What would be the impact to put that into this housing element?
So at this point, our housing element is based on the existing general plan. So at this point in time, we would not be able to make that addition. What we can do with the general plan, and I know we are looking with the downtown specific plan, some increased in densities, and I am familiar with Mr. Friedman. He has brought this up, so we are looking into it. I think, collectively we'll look at this point in our general plan process in the downtown, what it's going to take to kind of re-look at those areas and what the impact are to various studies. So we definitely will look at that opportunity. I think with the downtown, we are looking at the walkability and increased density overall for housing opportunities for both market rate and affordable within the downtown area.
So once this housing element is adopted, is there a way to make changes, or are we locked in for that till like 2029, I think you said? Are we locked in, or?
Actually, you're not. I mean, the document is eventually will be certified by the state of California. That's our intent and our hope. But there's nothing to prevent you from going back every year or periodically and revising programs. So a new situation occurs, a new opportunity occurs, and you want to take advantage of it. You can always amend the housing element. And oftentimes, what I'm seeing now is that cities will have a mid-cycle kind of small review to go back, take a look at the programs, make sure they're working, because the economy changes, and sometimes they'll work at certain parts of the economy, sometimes they don't, but just retool it. Just keep looking at it. I've seen other cities, they'll have just workshops that they'll have maybe every 2 to 3 years. And in addition, you do have a mechanism, it's called the annual progress report. that's going to be required, and it is required of all cities to do once you adopt the housing element. And what that basically does, it's a form where you go through all the programs, you look at what you said you wanted to do, you look at kind of what the progress has been, and it gives you an opportunity to make changes at that point. That has to be submitted to the Department of Housing and Community Development every year by April 1st. So that's also another opportunity to kind of relook at the programs and make sure they're working the way you want them to work. So it will be, in a sense, set in stone to get it certified, but after that, you're free to amend it, as needed.
I'll just add that there is a policy on the transit overlay district that's including the housing element, which I believe covers the SBX line. So there's an opening there to address density and improve the overlay district, which, to my understanding, isn't bringing any housing.
Yeah, that's just one thing I did want to add into what Mary had said, and forgive me if am saying similar things here. That is something that we are addressing both through the Downtown Specific Plan and the Development Code update. And the things Mr. Friedman mentioned, design, parking requirements, height, densities, things like that, those are addressed more through the land use element. As far as designating zoning districts and densities, and then through the actual development code, which is the implementation document for that. That's where you're going to get those specific standards for setbacks, placement, orientation, to get those pedestrian incentives and things of that sort. It's not something that really would be implemented through this, it's through those supporting documents.
Good evening, everybody. I have a comment. It seems like I think the main thing here we're on a time constraint, and I think what staff is recommending that we authorize based on the comments and direction given tonight and included comments. I don't know that that's going to happen. I mean, regardless of views here, you're asking that staff is recommending that you guys revise this document, send it to council, and then eventually go to housing and community development. Is that what I understand?
So as far as the draft document, and yes, and it does go to that entity, HCD, and they review it and provide comments, and then there's changes throughout that process.
Okay, so we leave comments, the comments you receive from the public. Where are those going? I know you're taking notes, and I appreciate that, but those comments are then, handpicked. Like, hey, we're going to put this comment. Yes, this is efficient. This is a legitimate comment, like somebody commented over here. Or this one's not so legitimate, so we're not going to include that. Or all of them going to include it? I think Chair mentioned that. Who's handpicking that, and when will we see a redraft? At that point? So
as we are doing the next update, we go through our consultant will go through all the comments. We'll take a look at where, changes are perhaps needed, or if there's something addressed in the housing element, we can reference that. So we'll make edits as appropriate, and it's based on, the experience of our consultant, what we're looking at as staff, what are the laws that we're working under, what are our requirements for housing elements. So we will make those edits, bring it forward to council. There still could be more comments that come through. You will see the document after we've incorporated all the comments as appropriate, and some may or may not, some may not go in. I won't say every comment that we receive will be included in the housing element, but we'll certainly be able to provide a response if we don't feel that something is appropriate at this time. And after HCD reviews it, that's when you will see the final document.
Okay, so just for clarity, and I respect and I appreciate the comment or the response. So here, if we were to, a lot of us or everybody here tonight is focusing, and I was there in that April meeting. I remember the community that came out. There was a lot of comments that night. Everybody was focused on this program, as everybody is tonight. We can recommend that this program be scratched from the housing element as a whole, Is that what I'm understanding?
You can make a recommendation to city council that that program be removed from the housing element.
And I also do appreciate the retooling comment because you know, there's a lot of things that make sense, a lot of things that may or may not apply to certain communities. We're very diverse in this area. I know there's people on the fence on both sides. Yeah, we love a safe community. Yeah, we want beautiful housing. Yeah, we want this. Yes, we don't want crime. We also want to give people the opportunity to live and not be discriminated against. And I think everybody's fair. It's fair to say everybody's probably like, hey, that's in a perfect world, right? And we would all love that. But I definitely think some retooling needs to be done. Where exactly? I mean, this is a huge, huge document. I'm on a future SB 2050 right now, and just reviewing it and going back and forth and taking into account the comments. I mean, you learn to appreciate, you know, both sides of the fence. But I do like the retooling comment. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, can you clarify to me the chain of command of this document here? So it will go from us, and then it will be gone to the city council for review.
The city council will review the draft and authorize staff to transmit the draft to the Department of Housing and Community Development for their initial review.
For HCD's initial review?
Initial review, correct.
And they then have the ability to say, hey, yay or nay?
Correct. So they will do their review in reviewing what we're proposing in compliance with state law. They're going to look at our housing sites, make sure that our RHNA allocation of properties are appropriate. They're going to look at our programs. They're going to provide comments. We're going to go back and address those comments, send another document back to them for review. So they'll be back and forth with the HCD staff, and they are the ultimate decision makers on whether our housing element complies with state law.
Right, but so I forgive me, I thought I heard earlier that this, before it got to HCD, would come back to the Planning Commission to look at the final draft or...
No, so the draft document, since it is in a draft form, and we have this ongoing public comment period, we will be updating the document for City Council based on comments. We received the Commission's comments as well. And we will, the recommendation will be for City Council to authorize staff to transmit that draft to HCD. We'll go back and forth with HCD to finalize the document. Once we get it to a point where HCD staff is comfortable that we've met all the requirements, we'll have our final review with them. We'll make final updates, bring that document back to you as the commission for your review and your final recommendation to City Council to adopt the housing element. Then it goes back up to the Department of Housing and Community Development for them to actually certify the document. So we still have a number of steps to go through, but you will see the final document before it goes to City Council and back up to the state.
And what is, this housing element was for the time period 2021 to 2029.
Correct.
This already puts us a couple of years in the
We
hole.
are behind, and so we
Okay.
are in some time constraints with HCD. It is important for us to get back on track
Right.
for their.
And we have a plan for that.
Correct, we
Sure.
do. Yes, we do. That's why we're here tonight.
Okay.
And we are asking you to move it forward a little bit quicker because we are trying to meet this obligation with the state and get, the city back on track for housing.
And if this draft comes back to us from the HDC, and we still find, well, let's just say it, we still find 3.2 still sitting there looking at us, we then have the ability to once again, talk to our city council, recommend that they amend it, change it, update it, get rid of it, whatever.
Correct. If it's there in the same format.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Question about the comments. Can we get a copy of the comments, or?
Yes, you may.
We can?
We have comments. I think some were distributed. One was a pretty good-sized binder.
The binder is the big comment for you guys
yeah.
all to look at, and then you guys all printed out copies of the small ones. You guys
Right.
already have comments of it.
Yeah,
Yes.
you have two of the letters just for the sake of the trees, as it
Yeah,
were.
I like to see it.
The,
Okay.
And we
The
can
180
we can
pages was
electronically transmit those to you as well, so you
Thank
you
you.
will have
Yes,
them.
yes.
We appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I have another comment, and excuse my ignorance, because from what I hear, it's you're gonna review the comments, gonna go recommend to city council is going to HCD make their comment, and then it's gonna come back. If I can read it verbatim on the agenda, I don't see that being said here, so please excuse my ignorance, but I just feel like anything gets moved here is gonna go to city council, HCD, and then we ain't gonna see it again. So if you just give me a minute just to read verbatim and tell me if I'm wrong, please. So staff recommendation.
if I may, actually, just to clarify, the recommendation itself isn't going to establish all of those, subsequent steps. The only action that you would be responsible for this evening is moving it to the council for their consideration and recommendation or authorization to submit. But exactly what you did call out is identified in second to last page of the report under the heading Next Steps. It does refer to, based off the comments, this evening, going to the planet or council meeting on August 2nd. Any comments there would then be incorporated into revision prior to submission to HCD. And then it does talk about their initial review period. Once we have HCD approval, bringing it back to the Planning Commission for a recommendation and City Council for adoption, and then submitting to the state for certification. So there's a lot of steps, and it can be it is a little bit confusing. Unfortunately, this process is not anywhere near a straight line, but.
Okay, and I appreciate it. I just, I seen it, I wouldn't say a little different. I seen it what I read, and I appreciate the explanation, but I hope you can respect the concern and just,
Absolutely.
Understood.
Absolutely. And we will bring this back to you. We're required to as well. But we definitely want, to bring it back to you in the final form.
I appreciate it. Just a reminder, we all live here, so this is something that's very concerning for us.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
We'll go ahead and make a motion. Now, are we going step by each item as noted on the recommendation? So item number 1, receive public comments on the 2021-2029 draft housing element.
So you actually have done that.
Right.
Yeah.
So do we need to go step by step to acknowledge those?
I would say council can correct me, but as written, only items 3 and 4 to incorporate any comments and then to actually move it forward to the city council. Those are the only 2 that expressly request a motion by the commission.
Okay. So we have already accomplished item 1 and item 2. We'll move with item number 3. Authorized by motion, staff to make necessary changes to the 2021-2029 draft housing element based on comments and direction. So we'll make a motion to do.
I motion that we direct staff to proceed to make the changes, including eliminating 3.2. If I can do that.
Can I ask for a point
Can
of
I do that?
clarification, Chair?
So now, as we have 2 motions on.
Excuse me, as just a point of procedure. The request, should we, agree to move forward with the recommendation to the council to eliminate program 3.2, that would need to actually be part of item 4. Item 3 just specifically speaks to any necessary changes, not to question the validity of changing that program, but item 4 speaks more to recommendations that we're making to the council. So as part of their consideration that we're proposing, we would then propose to amend that section.
So clarify me, so
Not
do I
sure.
recommend that we approve staff making the changes? That's all we do on item 3. We recommend staff.
Make the necessary
necessary
changes
changes.
to the draft element based on the comments received and the direction from the commission.
Right, so we have that motion now. Go ahead.
Is this, okay, does that work? Sorry. Yes, Chair Guerrero and Vice Chair Armstead, sorry. Yeah, so what I would say is the motion that is recommended by staff in step number 3 is to authorize staff to make any necessary changes to the draft housing element based on comments and direction. You will also need a motion and entertain a motion to actually recommend approval. And I would say that if you want to recommend additional changes, such as removal of program 3.2 or whatever that change might be, you could add that to the next motion when you're recommending approval in number 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do I have to say it again?
So yes, you should clarify your current motion,
Sorry, no, it's tricky.
just for the sake of the record.
Okay, for the sake of clarity, I motion to approve item 3 to direct staff to make the recommended changes. Am I right?
Right.
To
that's-
authorize staff to make necessary changes, correct? That's your
Yes.
motion?
Correct.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Right, then. But do we need to vote on this one?
Yes, you need a second, and
Yes.
then,
So we
So we have
have, we have a second with
and
Commissioner
then, so
Lewis.
you'll vote on this motion.
Okay, so call for the vote.
Chair
please.
Guerrero?
Yes.
Commissioner, or Vice Chair Armstead? Commissioner Lopez? Commissioner Garcia?
Yes.
Commissioner Quill? Commissioner Flores?
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis?
Yes.
Commissioner Sherrick?
I have a question before I vote. The necessary changes are the comments that were addressed today, the comments that the commission made, or are we making necessary changes from the previous housing element?
Yeah, all comments received on this housing element, be it the comments we've received from the public, comments tonight, and the commission comments.
Did we get a copy of previous comments? How are we voting on previous comments?
I would say in general, the comments that we've received tonight.
Those are the only comments that we've received?
There's other comments during the public review period that have been received that are still being gone through.
I think what I'm not understanding is we're being asked to vote on comments that were made prior to tonight, but we don't know what those comments were, so I'm not clear on what is.
Right.
This, go ahead.
So generally, the bulk of the comments you did receive, we did this evening, some of those comments were reiterated. We generally go through all of the comments and then prepare a document for review, and then we'll update them. But no, you did not receive all the public comments because our public comment period is still open. And we'll be presenting those to City Council.
It's not sitting well with me, Commissioner, and I'm not trying to be difficult.
No.
I just have a difficulty voting on something that I have not seen. We're saying,
Understood.
yes, we want to make these necessary changes, but we don't know what those necessary changes are.
So it's basically, it's not direction on any specific comments, it's comments in general that have been received by the city.
I abstain.
Can you clarify this again? You're asking us to direct staff to approve and direct staff to make the changes, but we don't know what the changes are?
You do not have all the comments that were received, so we are asking you to authorize us to make any of the necessary changes of comments that were been received to date.
I think just, no, to try to, I'll give it a crack. As we noted, this is not specific, saying that we're going to change this specific line. You know, as we would in one of our development applications, as an example, we may change this very specific thing as far as a setback or an improvement requirement or something. That is not what we're referring to. Because this project is ongoing, as has been noted, there will be continuing public comments, both through this period, those comments that we receive from HCD through the process. We will ultimately have to amend the document and make revisions to satisfy their requirements and any other comments that we may receive until we ultimately bring the document back for adoption. This is giving staff the ability to continue to do that through the process.
So this would give you the authority to make changes or make recommendations that you get from HDC?
Among others.
Among others. What would be an example of a necessary change?
Either one.
Commissioners, so my understanding of this motion, and to clarify, is that this motion authorizes staff to make changes not only, before submission to the council, the first draft, before submission to HCD after council approves, such that you don't need to vote on every single draft of the housing element. So you are just, by this particular motion, you are just authorizing staff to make further changes to the draft housing element based on comment and direction. You're not voting on any particular comment or whatnot, which is, it kind of in turn goes back to what I advised earlier with Vice Chair Armstead's, proposal, which was that if you do have a specific recommendation to council that you want to see implemented before it goes to HCD, that you could add that recommendation as part of your recommendation of approval. But that's different from just a general authorization to staff to make changes to the draft, such that you won't need to see every single draft, and so that we can continue to meet the timeline that the city is on to get in compliance. Does that clarify for you?
It gives a little bit better understanding. Thank you. I'd like to change my vote to yes.
Commissioner Garcia.
Yes.
Okay. So city is authorized to make the changes. Now for mode number 4.
We got one quick question. We're going to get a final draft to look at, right? We are. Once we're done with this whole process, we're all going to get a final draft before it gets
Yes.
finalized.
Following HCD's
following
review
HCD.
and their conditional approval, it will come back through the commission on its way to the city council for the formal adoption.
And that will have the recommended changes that staff.
We'll have whatever changes may come through this next 6-odd month process.
Yeah.
And can that one be redlined?
From this version,
Yes.
I mean, we'll have to be honest, without knowing exactly how the document's going to change through that time. I mean, we would have to see, but I think we could try to at least
Barring
provide-
substantial.
Yeah.
Well, we'll take a look at that, because once it comes back from HCD, that's really the final document that we take back through. We will not be bringing another draft document through the city's process. It will go through the HCD process. Is that correct, Mark?
So this is
This is a draft. Okay, this is a draft document. When it goes to city council, it will be a draft document. The draft will be submitted to HCD. We'll incorporate, comments as necessary. There will be some revisions, I'm sure, through that process. We will go back and forth in conversations with HCD. They'll send us changes they may want. We'll respond to those. Once we go through all those iterations, that is the document that they're buying off on, basically, that we bring back to adopt. So it won't be another draft. It'll be an actual document.
I think I understand the question. I would say what may be possible. I don't want to say absolutely, because I don't want to mislead that we'll have a 350, or I think it's a little more than that now, redline document. But what I think we may be able to do, as Mary had noted earlier in the presentation, we're going to be looking at putting something together of how we're responding to all of the substantial comments we've received thus far. We may be able to include something that addresses, these are the major changes, where a program was significantly altered, added, eliminated, things like that. So you may not have a point by point or line by line, edit of what was done, but you can see substantially, in maybe bullets or something to that effect, these were the major wholesale changes that were done, just to give you a little bit of a better idea. That may be a more manageable way of handling that.
So, and to clarify, when this document comes back to you after we go back and forth, with HCD, it is the city's document. It's our housing element. So you will have the opportunity to review that and either, recommend adoption or not. It is a required element that we have with the general plan, so we are required. So I don't want to say there's absolutely no opportunity for changes. But, we're anticipating and hopeful by the time we get through that HCD process, we've addressed, the community concerns, the entities that have provided comments, as well as the commission. So when we bring it back to you, that you're, more comfortable with that document. So it in essence is a draft document. I was stating that it was a final document. It for our intents and purposes, it's a final document, but it still is a draft document until you make the recommendation to City Council.
So we're still looking for a motion on number 4.
Okay, excuse me, I motion we proceed with approving this housing element minus 3.2.
Could I clarify the actual motion is you're authorizing to submit the revised document. You're recommending the City Council authorize the Community Housing and Economic Development Department to submit the revised document to the State Department of Housing Community Development for review. And then,
minus 3.2.
And then you want to have minus 3.2.
Correct.
I'll second.
Okay, Chair Guerrero?
No.
So you no to authorizing or no to removing 3.2?
I do not recommend, well, I do recommend that it gets authorized.
Okay.
However, without the elimination of 3.2.
Okay. So yes. And then no. Yeah. Okay, and then so on the vote, we're taking the vote on your motion, Armstead. Just she doesn't agree with the taking out like you do is all. So we're authorizing it to go forward. So Vice Chair Armstead, you vote minus 3.2. Okay, and Commissioner Lopez? Yes. Just yes? Okay. Commissioner, I just want to make sure. Commissioner Garcia?
No.
No. Commissioner Flores? Or excuse me, Quill? No. Flores? Yes. Commissioner Lewis?
No.
No. Commissioner Sherrick?
I want to make sure we can still make revisions as necessary.
Yes.
No.
Commissioner Garcia?
No.
Could you read what was the final vote?
1, 2, 3.
So basically with this vote, we have 3 yes to to approve the motion with removing item 3.2.
We have 1 yes to removing it, 3 yeses in general. So Guerrero, Armstead, and Lopez voted yes.
Right, to move, to authorize the submittal to the city council minus item 3.2.
Armstead is the only one that clarified to remove 3.2.
Well, no, that's the motion, though. The motion is,
Yeah, her motion is to remove the 3.2, and we voted no.
correct. Correct. So the motion is to remove it. So at this point, the way the motion is it does not go forward to city council. So we would need a new motion to authorize to recommend that the mayor and city council authorize the community development department to submit the revised document to the State Department of Housing and Urban Development for review. So there would need to be an alternate motion.
So I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
Go.
Question, don't we review that first again before it goes to city council?
No. No,
Okay.
the action tonight, after the comments, after it goes to HCD is when it would come back. So right now, we would not be moving the housing element forward. I'm not sure that's exactly.
Commissioners, to clarify, I think would be helpful to clarify, the motion that was on the floor, that was voted upon, was the motion to recommend that the mayor and city council authorize the department to submit the revised documents to HCD approval and to recommend to the council that 3.2 be removed. That's the motion that failed. You may want to entertain a new motion to recommend that the mayor and city council authorize the department to submit the revised document without the additional language that was considered in the previous motion.
I'll make a motion to authorize the Community Housing Economic Development to submit the revised document to the State Housing and Community Development for review.
Second.
Commissioner Garcia, I apologize, Vice Chair Guerrero. Just to clarify your motion is to recommend that the mayor and city council authorize the department to submit the revised document to HCD for review, correct?
Correct, Council.
And Chair, did I hear the second from you? Okay. Yeah, okay, sorry. I thought I heard your voice. I wanted to make sure. Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay, so Chair Guerrero.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Chair Armstead. Commissioner Lopez. Commissioner Garcia.
Yes, and just to be clear, this is to submit this draft as is with 3.2. Yes. That's correct.
Yes. Commissioner Quill? Yes. Commissioner Flores? Commissioner Lewis?
Yes.
And Commissioner Sherrick?
Yes.
And Commissioner Garcia?
Yes.
Okay. So it's approved.
That's 7-2?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes this item. And back to the agenda.
Do we have any reports or announcements from Planning Commission?
I just had one comment or question. I was wondering when our next quarterly project updates will be provided for the ongoing construction projects that we have within our city. I know we're short-staffed at the moment, but just wanted to get a date.
For a quarterly update on current projects going on with this, as far as the entitlement process in the city, we can have that for you at your next meeting.
Thank you.
I have a question or request. Is it possible to get a list of permits being submitted so we know what projects are being proposed in our awards? Can we get that?
So we are working on developing a comprehensive list of, and when you say permits, are you talking about development applications coming in, like conditional
they're-
use permits,
Just so we know
development
what's going
plans?
on, yes.
We don't have that list currently, but it's something we will be working on. So let me get back with you on a date on that. It's something I am looking at right now on developing that comprehensive list. But we don't have that. We have individual lists, but I'd like to get something a little bit more comprehensive for you.
One thing I had asked for at a previous commission meeting was we allow conditions of approval for a developer to provide in lieu fees during development. And I was wondering if those projects have been budgeted in the CIP, if that money is being tracked. Where are we with that? And we usually have a representative from Public Works here. I don't think we do tonight, but that is something I had asked for previously.
Okay, so when you're saying in lieu fees for like a traffic signal?
Traffic signal, street improvement, curb gutter, yes.
Right. So I'll check with our Public Works Director and check on, kind of where they're at on that list. I know normally when you have an in lieu fee, you actually have an agreement and there's a time frame for that. So let me kind of see where they're at on that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Does the director have any announcements, anything
Not for tonight, other than, it's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to working with all of you during my tenure here, which is probably going to be about, maybe up to 6 months or so while the city recruits for some permanent positions. But, I'll be here, 100%. I'm committed to the city during that time. And certainly we'll look into some of the items that you've mentioned this evening and see what we can do to get those items to you. Okay.
Thank you. With that being, then we'll go ahead and adjourn our meeting at 7:55 p.m.